He couldn't believe it. A human being was eating the most dangerous animal on the planet. The fire crackled with a sound not unlike the deep hum of a distant engine, the flames twisting upward like the tendrils of a rogue starship's exhaust. The air smelled faintly of something both alien and familiar, burnt meat, perhaps, or the strange mix of spices and herbs that the Thryxians had cultivated for millennia. Princess Alenya could hardly believe what she was seeing. A human, sitting there, casually roasting the flesh of a Zheron over an open fire, as if this was some ordinary hunting trip, not the kind of event that had sent countless warriors to their doom. She glanced around, half expecting to see the hidden eyes of her warriors, prepared to leap into action. But no one moved. No one dared. She took a step forward, her boots sinking softly into the alien soil, a mixture of crushed leaves and glittering sand that made every footstep feel like she was walking through an ancient tapestry. Her heart pounded, every instinct in her screamed to stop him, to reprimand him, to make sure he understood the magnitude of what he was doing. But she couldn't. The strange human sat there, utterly unconcerned. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The words felt absurd even as they left her lips. The man looked up, unfazed by the question. "I'm eating," he said, pointing a fork at the sizzling meat with a casual flick. "You want some? It's surprisingly tender." Alenya blinked, momentarily speechless. Her fingers twitched at her side where her energy blade rested, ready for action, should it come to that. But no. This was not how it was supposed to be. The Zheron was sacred. No. It was divine, the embodiment of HFY's wild power. And here this human was, eating it as if it were just another piece of meat. "You're eating Zheron," she finally said, the words tasting foreign even to her ears. Zheron, the god of Thryx. Jaren, the human, paused, blinking at her as though she had just said something about the weather. "Yeah, well, I guess I don't really see the big deal. It's just meat, right?" He took a bite, chewed, and shrugged as if it were the most mundane thing in the universe. "Tastes kind of like, I dunno, beef, but more intense." Alenya felt a jolt of disbelief. This human, this outsider, was not only disrespecting their most sacred creature, but was doing so without a hint of fear or remorse. In fact, he seemed almost content. "You can't just eat Zheron," she exclaimed, stepping forward, her voice rising despite herself. "It's a god to my people. You can't." Jaren waved a hand dismissively, his grin widening. "A god, huh? Well, I'm sorry, but where I come from, gods don't exactly taste as good." He glanced at her, clearly amused. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I'm still here." The audacity, the sheer audacity of this human. Alenya stared at him, her eyes narrowing as her thoughts raced. Could it be possible? Could he be that ignorant? Or was he just that fearless? She crossed her arms, trying to suppress a grin of her own, despite the shock still coursing through her. "You don't seem to understand what you've done. You've desecrated something ancient, something sacred." Jaren leaned back, throwing a log onto the fire. I get it. You're all freaked out because of some ancient myth. But it's just meat, princess. You know, the kind that's actually edible. And trust me, I've eaten weirder stuff on Earth. No offense, but this Zheron is pretty tame by comparison." Alenya's mind reeled. "Earth?" she asked, the word unfamiliar on her tongue. "Where's that?" "Earth. You know, back home. The place I came from," Jaren said, taking another bite and gesturing vaguely with his free hand. "We've got forests there, too, but not nearly as interesting as this place. Plus, no creatures that can eat you in one bite, thankfully." Alenya could hardly process it all. The notion of Zheron being tame was so alien to her that it was like he was speaking another language altogether. The Zheron was not just any creature. It was a beast of legend, a being that had existed for centuries and whose presence had defined the very history of Thryx. To speak of it was to speak of death. To hunt it was to seek oblivion. And yet, here was this man, sitting in front of her, unbothered by the enormity of what he had done. You're not afraid?" she asked, her voice low, almost incredulous. "You're not even the slightest bit frightened?" Jaren looked at her as if the question were absurd. Afraid? What for? I mean, yeah, I knew Zheron was dangerous. But if I'm being honest, it looked pretty tasty, too. So I figured, why not give it a shot? Worst case scenario, I end up a little dead. Best case, I get dinner and a good story. Her warriors, who had been standing in the background, looked at one another in confusion. Alenya could hear them whispering, murmurs of disbelief, some unsure whether to intervene or remain at her side. But it was clear. They, too, were shocked by the man's sheer lack of fear. You don't understand, Alenya said, her voice softening just slightly. Zheron isn't just a creature. It's part of us. Part of who we are. The old ones, they say Zheron is the soul of Thryx itself. Jaren shrugged again, as if that explanation didn't quite register with him. Look, lady, I get that you all are super attached to your sacred beast, but where I come from, we've got all kinds of weird creatures. Some are dangerous, some are cute. You can't just go around treating every animal like it's a god. Sometimes it's just meat. A long silence stretched between them, and Alenya had to fight the urge to laugh. The absurdity of the situation was too much. Here she was, princess of Thryx, trying to make sense of a human's actions, while he continued to casually snack on a creature revered by her people as a god. She exhaled slowly. You're insane. Maybe, Jaren said with a grin, but it's the kind of insanity that gets you fed. Alenya watched him for a long moment, trying to piece together what was going on. This human Jaren was either the biggest fool she had ever met, or something much, much more. But as the fire flickered and the night air grew colder, one thing was clear. His actions had set something in motion, something neither she nor her people had expected. And whether he realized it or not, he was about to become a catalyst for change. So what now? Jaren asked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. You going to kick me off your planet, or? Alenya paused, considering. I don't know what you're doing here, she said finally. But you've certainly made things complicated. Well, that's kind of my thing, Jaren said with a grin. I'm Jaren, by the way. Nice to meet you, princess. Alenya, she replied, still processing the strange course her night had taken. All right, Alenya, Jaren said, standing up and stretching. If we're going to make this work, you're going to need to teach me how to cook something other than gods. Her eyes narrowed. You're not getting away that easily. Oh, I'm sure I'll find a way, he said with a wink. And so the princess found herself faced with a challenge she never could have anticipated. An unpredictable human who had no respect for Thryx's myths, but somehow was shaping up to be a far more interesting ally than she could have ever imagined. Jaren stood by the fire, hands on his hips, looking at Alenya with a bemused smile. She, on the other hand, couldn't quite shake the feeling that she was trapped in the middle of some strange dream. The audacity of this human, this wanderer from Earth, who had the gall to eat the very god of Thryx. And now, he was standing there, asking for more lessons. If there was one thing she was sure of, it was that her life would never be the same. So what's next? Jaren asked, his tone light as he leaned casually against a rock, watching her warily. You going to teach me to cook some more sacred meat, or maybe show me how to worship something for fun? Alenya glared at him, her brow furrowing. You really don't get it, do you? Oh, I get it, he said, putting a hand on his chest. The whole Zheron is sacred thing. But listen, I didn't come all this way to sit around and get lectured about ancient legends. I came for adventure, and right now, I'm getting more of a don't touch anything vibe than anything else. Alenya threw her hands up in exasperation. You can't just wander around here like it's some kind of vacation. You're trespassing on a land that is sacred, a land where every step could be your last. Jaren cocked an eyebrow. Yeah, I've been told that a couple of times. But so far, it's been a pretty smooth ride. He waved a hand in the air, as though dismissing her concerns. Look, princess, I get it. It's dangerous here. But you want to know the truth? The thing I really came here to see. It's not the crazy beasts or the legends. It's you guys, the Thryxians. I mean, a whole civilization living on a planet where everything tries to kill you? That's kind of impressive. Alenya stared at him, disbelieving. Impressive. Yeah, I mean, think about it. You all make surviving here look easy. You live among these beasts, treat them like gods, and yet you don't even flinch when something wants to eat you for dinner. That's gutsy. That's real survival. You're giving me far too much credit, she muttered, crossing her arms and staring out into the darkness beyond the firelight. What you don't understand is that the Zheron isn't just any creature. It's part of our history. It's what keeps us from falling into chaos. Without Zheron, Thryx would crumble. You can't just kill it. Eat it. It's unthinkable. Well, I didn't kill it, Jaren pointed out, kicking a stray rock with his boot. I mean, it was already dead when I found it. I just made it into something useful. And hey, I think I did a pretty good job, considering the circumstances. Alenya had no response for that. It was true. The Zheron had been dead when Jaren had discovered it, torn apart by a territorial fight with another predator. But that didn't make it right. It didn't make it okay for a human to desecrate what was considered a living god. Jaren's voice cut through her thoughts. You know, I've eaten all sorts of crazy things back home. Stuff that would make you gag. But Zheron? It's got a certain... He paused, looking up at the sky. A certain je ne sais quoi. I'm telling you, this thing has potential. I'm thinking of making a stew next time. Alenya gave him a look that could only be described as equal parts incredulous and exhausted. Stew? You're talking about making stew out of Zheron? Jaren grinned like a child with a new toy. Exactly. Don't knock it till you try it. A laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. It was a soft, reluctant chuckle that seemed to surprise her more than anything. You're unbelievable, she muttered under her breath. Thanks, I try, he replied, his tone completely serious. So, you want me to teach you how to make Zheron stew? I'm pretty sure I could teach you a thing or two about cooking. I mean, you all are great with the whole don't get eaten by monsters thing, but cooking? That's a skill I've got down to an art. Alenya rolled her eyes, but couldn't quite suppress the grin tugging at her lips. You're ridiculous. Hey, a little ridiculousness is what makes life interesting, Jaren said with a wink, flashing her a grin so wide it was almost contagious. But seriously, if you're not going to teach me how to cook, you could at least teach me something useful. Like, how to not get eaten by the next random beast that shows up. You're hopeless, she muttered, though her voice was warmer now. Fine. Follow me. Jaren's eyes lit up. Wait, what? Are you actually going to teach me something useful? I said follow me, didn't I? Alenya said, already walking off toward the dense jungle. She heard Jaren's footsteps behind her, but didn't look back. If you're going to stay here, you'll need to learn how to survive. Not just kill and eat whatever you find, but survive. Jaren caught up with her easily. Oh, I'm all about surviving. I mean, I've been to some pretty rough places back home. I'm just saying, your planet's got a lot more teeth. Alenya didn't respond to that. The more she thought about it, the more her own world seemed surreal. She had spent her entire life surrounded by legends of Zheron, the beast that ruled Thryx, and now here was a human, someone who should be terrified, someone who should be cautious, blithely dismissing it as just another meal. But in his carefree attitude, there was a strange sort of bravery, not the kind born from ignorance, but from an entirely different sort of courage. As they moved through the jungle, Alenya kept an eye on the ground, noting the scattered remains of creatures past. Strange footprints led into a dense thicket, marking the presence of a predator, perhaps one that had fed on the remains of another Zheron or some smaller, equally dangerous beast. But Jaren was undeterred. He stepped over the gnarled roots and vines without a second glance, as though the jungle itself were a friendly path to be walked casually. It irritated her. How could he be so calm? Keep your head on a swivel, Alenya said, as they approached a clearing. This is the part of Thryx where things like to jump out at you. Jaren looked around, his hands still in his pockets. Is that so? Well, I guess if it's anything like Earth, I'll just pretend to be a tree. That seems to work for all the wildlife back home. Alenya gave him a side eye, but couldn't help the chuckle that escaped. You really do think you're invincible, don't you? I don't know about invincible, but I've survived worse, he said, scanning the trees above them. You'd be surprised how often a good sense of humor gets you out of trouble. That and a sharp stick. Alenya paused, wondering if he was serious. Then she looked at him, and despite everything, she realized he was. The jungle fell silent, and for a moment, neither of them moved. There was a rustling sound in the trees ahead. Alenya's senses snapped to attention, her hand hovering near the hilt of her blade. Jaren, however, wasn't quite as quick. He was still looking at her with that same laid-back expression. Jaren, move. Alenya hissed, but it was too late. The predator dropped from the trees, its eyes glowing, its jaws opening wide. Jaren barely had time to react, but as the creature lunged, he grabbed a fallen branch and swung it with an unexpected precision, knocking the beast back with a grunt. Well, that wasn't on the menu, he muttered, rubbing his hand. Alenya shook her head, half exasperated, half impressed. I'll never understand you. The sun rose slowly over HFY, casting an eerie glow across the alien landscape. The massive trees, some taller than the largest ships Jaren had seen, stood still in the pre-dawn light, their leaves rustling in an almost conspiratorial whisper. Jaren stretched his arms overhead, his muscles sore from the night's adventure. Alenya, walking a few steps ahead of him, looked as though she hadn't slept at all, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if the very act of breathing might somehow be a betrayal of her mission. So, what's the deal with the Thryxian sleep schedule? Jaren asked, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. You guys only nap once every 3 days or something. Alenya shot him a sideways glance, but didn't respond. It had been hours since the creature in the clearing had disappeared, but the adrenaline still buzzed in the air. She wasn't used to having her territory violated like that, but now, with Jaren in tow, she was starting to question if there was something deeper at play here. Something about the human intrigued her, his seemingly endless capacity to remain unfazed. Or maybe it was his absurdity that kept pulling her in. Either way, she couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was about to get worse. All right, here's the plan, she said finally, her voice cutting through the early morning silence. We're going to cross through the Vale of Shera. It's a dangerous stretch of land, but it's the fastest route to the central stronghold where the council is waiting. Jaren didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced around at the wild world surrounding them, still in awe of the strange beauty. You know, he said, his eyes scanning the sky as a large, iridescent bird flapped by. If I didn't know any better, I'd say this place is a freaking nightmare. It's like someone took a blender and threw every dangerous creature on their worst day into it. But I gotta admit, the colors are something else. Alenya smirked, though she didn't stop walking. You might have a point there, but there's a reason no one ventures into the Vale. It's not just the creatures. It's the rifts. Rifts? Jaren asked, raising an eyebrow. What, like some kind of interdimensional tear in reality? Alenya paused for a moment, as though considering how best to explain it. More or less, the Vale is full of temporal rifts, holes in the fabric of space and time. Sometimes, things from the past or future slip through. Jaren blinked. Wait, you're telling me there are time travelers here? I'm not sure about that, Alenya said with a shrug. But I've seen things. Things that shouldn't be here. It's dangerous, even for the Thryxians. So it's like a cosmic glitch, Jaren mused. All right, this just keeps getting more interesting. They continued through the thick foliage, Alenya keeping a sharp eye out, though Jaren had quickly gotten the hang of navigating the jungle's bizarre terrain. Despite the situation, his nonchalant attitude was starting to rub off on her, and she found herself almost enjoying the banter. Almost. We've been traveling together for days now, Jaren said, breaking the silence again, and I still don't know much about you. You said you're a princess. That's got to be a pretty big deal here, right? Alenya didn't answer immediately. She had told him a few things, fragments of her life, bits and pieces, but she wasn't about to unload her whole story on a stranger, especially not one who was so casually roasting sacred beasts over open flames. My position is complicated, she said at last, her voice steady. HFY is ruled by the Council of Elders, but I'm next in line to lead the Thryxian clans. It's a job I don't take lightly, and it comes with responsibilities. Yeah, I get that, Jaren said, nodding as he adjusted the strap of his bag. But I have to admit, I'm still kind of curious why you're so hung up on the Zheron thing. I mean, sure, it's big and scary, but is it really worth all the fuss? Alenya stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. You think it's just big and scary? She asked, her voice low. The Zheron is a living symbol of everything that Thryx is. Its history, its power, its future. My people believe that the Zheron controls the very heartbeat of our planet. If the Zheron were to die, Thryx itself would fall into chaos. The balance would be shattered. Jaren thought about that for a moment, the weight of her words finally sinking in. Okay, that's a little heavier than I expected. Alenya smiled, though it wasn't a happy expression. Yes, it is. They pressed on in silence, the jungle pressing in on all sides, the air thick with the sounds of unseen creatures. As they neared the Vale of Shera, the trees began to thin, and the land opened up into a vast expanse of rocky, craggy terrain. The ground here was uneven, pocked with strange, shimmering fissures, rifts, just as Alenya had warned. Some were small, no bigger than a hand, while others were large enough to swallow a person whole. Jaren took one look at the nearest rift, a jagged tear in space that pulsed with an eerie blue light, and whistled. That's definitely not something you see every day. Alenya eyed him warily. Stay away from them. The rifts can't be trusted. They distort time, and you never know where, or when, you'll end up. Jaren chuckled. Oh, you mean like some kind of cosmic lottery, where you might end up in a dimension full of sentient cupcakes? Alenya raised an eyebrow. Sentient cupcakes? Yeah, you know, cupcakes that think for themselves. Maybe they're just trying to get ahead in life. Who knows? I think I'd rather end up there than somewhere I get eaten. Alenya couldn't help the laugh that escaped her. You're impossible. Hey, it's a gift, Jaren said with a wink, his grin wide. But seriously, are we going through this veil or what? Alenya's expression shifted to something more serious. We are. But you'll need to keep your wits about you. The rifts have been getting worse. Some say they've been caused by the Zheron's death. Others think it's just a natural phenomenon. Either way, I don't trust them. Jaren nodded. Got it. No time-traveling cupcakes for me today. I'll behave. They continued on, stepping carefully around the unstable ground. Jaren, surprisingly nimble for someone from another world, matched her pace. Alenya glanced at him again, noting how easily he moved through the dangerous terrain, how little he seemed to worry about the rifts or the strange creatures that occasionally peered out from the shadows. I still don't get why you're here, Alenya said, her voice thoughtful. You're not like the other humans I've heard about. Most of them wouldn't last a day on Thryx. Jaren gave her a sidelong look. I don't know. I guess I'm just curious. You guys have all these legends, these powerful creatures, and I'm sitting here thinking, what if there's something bigger going on? Something more than just survival? I mean, a planet full of these weird rifts, creatures that could rip you apart in seconds. That doesn't just happen, does it? Alenya stopped, her eyes narrowing. You think there's more to it? I think there's always more, Jaren said with a shrug. That's why I'm here. Why I came. I want to understand. Alenya's lips pressed into a thin line. Maybe he wasn't as oblivious as he seemed. Maybe there was more to him than just a reckless wanderer with an appetite for danger. But in a place like Thryx, the truth was often a double-edged sword. If Jaren was right, if there was something else at play here, she had to find out what it was before it was too late. Fine, she said, turning back toward the veil. Let's see if we can survive the veil first. Then we'll figure out the rest. The Vale of Shera stretched before them like a living, breathing riddle, a massive labyrinth of jagged rock and glowing fissures. The ground seemed to pulse with the faintest hum, an eerie vibration that whispered secrets of the past, the future, of everything and nothing. The rifts were more active here than anywhere else on Thryx. Some swirled in lazy spirals, while others flashed like lightning, creating sudden disorienting flashes of light and shadow. Jaren stepped lightly over the uneven terrain, his feet finding the natural rhythm of the land, while Alenya moved with a practiced grace, her eyes darting constantly, scanning for any signs of movement. But Jaren was having trouble keeping his mind focused on anything but the rifts. He hadn't seen anything like them before, fissures in space-time that twisted reality and threatened to swallow everything whole. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the raw energy radiating from them. "So, these rifts," Jaren said, looking at a particularly large one that seemed to be eating the light around it. "They don't, spit out alternate versions of me, do they? Because I'm really not ready to meet a version of me that's smarter or, heaven forbid, more organized." Alenya glanced back at him, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips despite herself. "If one of you came out of that rift, I think I'd need a drink." Jaren grinned. "A drink? I was thinking I might need a new set of pants. Can you imagine the chaos if two of me showed up?" Alenya's smile faltered as they approached the first rift that seemed unusually active. It swirled like a vortex, not just bending light, but distorting sound, too. Every footstep they took seemed muffled, like they were moving underwater. The blue glow coming from the rift pulsed, in rhythm with their heartbeat. Alenya stopped a few paces from it. "All right, no jokes now," she said, her tone hardening. "This one's unstable. Stay away from it." Jaren looked from her to the rift. "Oh, I'm not planning to shake hands with it or anything," he said, his voice light, but his gaze still wary. "I've learned the hard way not to mess with things that bend reality. Learned that on Earth, actually. Once tried to pet a teleporting cat. Turns out, it wasn't the cat that was teleporting, it was me. And I don't need that kind of trouble right now." Alenya snorted before catching herself. "I thought humans didn't have animals that teleport. I thought you all were obsessed with technology." "We do have tech, but cats are unpredictable. They're like the universe's little time bombs. But yeah, I'll take your advice. No wandering into the rift." But Jaren's curiosity wasn't easily squashed. As they moved on, he kept a nervous eye on the rift, almost daring it to act up. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive, or at least something trying to be alive. It seemed to hum and pulse with energy, as if it were waiting for something or someone. The path grew narrower, the land steeper. Every few meters, Alenya would stop and examine the rifts, pushing through a silent calculation, her lips pressed tightly together as if wrestling with an invisible force. Jaren knew it wasn't just about survival for her. It was about making sure he didn't get swallowed up by the dangers lurking here. But that didn't stop him from trying to make her laugh. "You know," he said, half smiling, "if you don't stop frowning like that, you might accidentally create a rift in the fabric of the universe yourself. Maybe you're the real danger here." Alenya didn't respond at first, but when she looked back at him, there was a glimmer of something, a brief flash of amusement. "That's the last thing I need," she said. "I'm already dealing with enough headaches." Jaren cocked an eyebrow. "Oh, what else could possibly make this crazier? A time-traveling Zheron that insists on narrating its life story." "I wish," Alenya muttered under her breath. "No, it's the council. They've been pressuring me. They think I've been too lenient with outsiders." Jaren's face shifted from playful to serious. "You mean me?" Alenya didn't look at him as she nodded, her eyes still focused on the horizon. "You and others like you. They don't trust humans. They think your presence here is destabilizing things. The Zheron's death, it's all connected. They believe your arrival is a sign." "A sign?" Jaren scoffed. "What? That I'm the planet's next big catastrophe?" Alenya hesitated before responding, her voice softer. "They think you might be the one to help us, or the one to destroy us. I don't know which." They moved on, the weight of her words hanging in the air like the thick fog that began to roll in, obscuring the path ahead. Alenya led them down a narrow passage, barely wide enough for one person, let alone two. The rift seemed closer now, almost pressing in on them. The ground trembled underfoot, and Jaren felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of nausea wash over him. "Is this normal?" Jaren asked, his hand instinctively going to his stomach as the ground shifted beneath them. "Because I'm pretty sure my world's gravity isn't supposed to do this." Alenya looked back at him with an odd mix of concern and impatience. "The veil isn't normal. That's why we're so careful here. The rifts cause seismic shifts in the planet's core. Things change with every step. You just have to stay focused. Jaren nodded, but felt the vertigo intensify. Okay, focus. I've got it. But if we're going to keep going through these rifts, I'm going to need more than just a couple of jokes to keep my sanity. Alenya gave him a sidelong glance, but said nothing, her eyes scanning the landscape ahead. The air felt dense now, like they were moving through a mist of forgotten memories. The rifts had become more frequent, and the intensity of their glow increased as they progressed deeper into the veil. But it wasn't just the rifts that unsettled Jaren. It was something else, something lurking just beyond their vision. He stopped abruptly, his instincts kicking in. What's wrong? Alenya asked, turning back. Did you hear that? Jaren asked, his voice low, his eyes darting around. It was like a hum, almost like a voice. Alenya's face shifted, a sharp edge to her expression now. What kind of voice? I don't know, but it's not just the rifts. It's something else. Something's calling. Alenya's eyes narrowed. You've got to be hearing things. But as the words left her mouth, the ground shook again, and a distant rumble echoed from the heart of the veil, louder than before. This time, there was no mistaking it. A deep, guttural growl reverberated through the ground beneath them. I'm not hearing things, Jaren said, his voice urgent. Something's coming. Without another word, Alenya reached for her energy blade, its hum vibrating in her palm. Get ready. Jaren did the same, reaching for his own weapon, an old, rusted machete that had been strapped to his belt since he'd crash-landed on Thryx. It wasn't much, but it had done the job so far. The growl grew louder, now accompanied by a low rumbling that seemed to come from the rifts themselves, as though the land itself was warning them of what was about to emerge. And as they braced themselves, Alenya's voice, steady and commanding, cut through the chaos. Whatever happens, she said, locking eyes with him, we stay together. Understand? Jaren nodded, tightening his grip on the machete. Yeah, I get it. We don't die alone. The ground trembled again. The sound of something massive moving through the veil sent vibrations through the air, and Alenya's eyes darkened with the weight of the unknown. Something was coming, and this time, it wasn't going to be a creature they could just laugh off. The ground shook beneath their feet, more violent now, and the deep rumbling sound grew louder, almost deafening. Jaren's grip tightened on his machete as he scanned the veil, but there was no sign of anything yet, only the swirls of light from the rifts and the unsettling hum that seemed to come from all directions. Alenya's eyes were wide, her expression one of grim determination, and Jaren realized for the first time that maybe, just maybe, this planet wasn't just a giant playground for dangerous creatures and weird rifts. Thryx wasn't just a place to survive. It was a place that could break you if you weren't careful. And now, it was trying to break them both. Stay close, she muttered, her blade humming to life as it pulsed with an eerie light. We can't outrun this thing, but we can fight. Fight? Jaren shot her a skeptical look. With what? My rusty machete? I'm not exactly packing for an intergalactic war, you know. Alenya shot him a sharp glance. Trust me, I know. But if we're going to survive, we have to stay sharp. Jaren opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, the growling became deafening. A massive shape emerged from the fog, its scales shimmering in the light of the rifts, eyes glowing a sickly yellow. The creature was unlike anything Jaren had ever seen, a twisted mix of organic matter and something more unnatural, like it had been born from the veil itself. It towered over them, moving with an unsettling fluidity, its claws scraping against the stone as it prowled closer. Jaren swallowed hard. Well, that's definitely not a sentient cupcake. Alenya didn't respond, but she moved into a defensive stance, her body coiling with ready energy. Get ready. Whatever that thing is, it's tied to the rifts. We can't let it get any closer. The creature, whatever it was, snarled, its huge jaws snapping shut with a sickening sound, and then, before either of them could react, it lunged. Alenya was faster, her energy blade cutting through the air like a streak of light, but the creature's thick hide absorbed the blow, only a minor cut left across its side. Jaren, for his part, swung his machete with as much force as he could muster, but the blade glanced off the creature's thick scales with a dull, metallic sound. "Great," Jaren muttered, trying to sidestep as the creature's tail swung dangerously close. "I'm starting to regret not packing heavier weaponry." "I don't think you could fit anything that heavy into those pants," Alenya shot back, her voice strained with the effort as she dodged the creature's claws. Jaren grinned, despite the situation. "Maybe next time, I'll pack an anti-monster cannon. Just survive this one," she snapped. "Then we'll talk." With a growl that made the air vibrate, the creature swung its massive tail toward them again, but this time, Jaren was ready. He dived, rolling out of the way, and then lunged at the creature's side. His machete found purchase, digging deep into the softer underbelly near its ribcage. The creature howled in pain, thrashing wildly, and Jaren managed to pull the blade free, panting heavily. "Okay," Jaren said, his breath ragged. "I'll admit that was satisfying, but it's still trying to kill us." Alenya didn't have time to acknowledge his comment. She was already on the move again, her blade crackling with energy as she aimed for a vulnerable spot on the creature's neck. The creature twisted, but not fast enough. The blade sunk deep into its flesh, and the creature's roar was deafening as it staggered back. Jaren didn't waste time. He took advantage of the creature's momentary disorientation, grabbing a large rock and throwing it with everything he had at its head. The rock hit with a loud crack, and the creature faltered again. "Think we've got it?" Jaren asked, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Alenya didn't answer immediately. She studied the creature, its glowing eyes dimming as the life began to drain from it. Finally, she stepped back and lowered her blade, watching it collapse to the ground with a heavy thud. "Yeah," she said, her voice quieter now. "We've got it." The silence that followed was thick, almost oppressive. Jaren wiped the sweat from his forehead, his chest heaving as the adrenaline began to ebb away. Alenya stood still, her posture slightly slumped, as if the weight of the battle had finally caught up with her. "So, that was fun," Jaren said, breaking the silence with his usual easygoing tone. "I mean, aside from the giant monster and the whole near-death experience. What's next? Do we roast it over a fire and make a stew?" Alenya gave him a tired but genuine smile, the first real one he'd seen in days. "No stew. But maybe we'll find a use for its bones. The Thryxians are resourceful like that." Jaren chuckled. "I'll pass on the monster bones, thanks." "Wise choice," she said, turning toward the rift that still swirled behind them. The glowing fissure was quieter now, its strange hum having died down with the creature's defeat. But something else had shifted in the air, a sense of completion, of finality. They stood there for a long moment, the weight of what they'd just faced settling in. Alenya's expression grew distant as she stared at the rift. All of this, it's connected. The Zheron's death, the rifts, the monsters, it's all part of a bigger picture. I thought the creature we just faced was just a random predator, but it's not. It's like a symptom of something deeper, a ripple in the fabric of Thryx itself. Jaren followed her gaze, his own thoughts swirling. "You mean the rifts are getting worse because of the Zheron's death? Because whatever's coming through is changing things?" Alenya nodded slowly. "Exactly. I don't think it's just coincidence. I think this planet is dying, and maybe we're the last ones who can save it." Jaren considered that for a long moment. There was something oddly comforting about the idea that, in some small way, his presence here, his decisions, had made a difference. Maybe it started out just looking for adventure, but in the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about changing things, about making a lasting impact. "I'm not much of a hero," Jaren said, finally breaking the silence. "But I guess I'm okay with saving a planet, especially one with such interesting monsters." Alenya smiled again, a real smile, her eyes softening. "You might be more of a hero than you think, Jaren." He shrugged, a grin tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, the rifts are still here, and we've probably got a whole lot more trouble ahead of us. But hey, I'm a fast learner." They both turned back toward the rift, watching as the strange energy pulsated, now almost calm. The veil had fallen silent, the creatures and the rifts temporarily subdued, but the feeling of something unresolved hung in the air. "I guess it's time to go back," Alenya said. "Back to the council. They're going to need to hear about this." Jaren nodded, stepping forward. "Right. And then we can figure out what's next. I'm guessing it involves more monsters, more rifts, and, hopefully, less cooking." Alenya gave him a playful shove. "We'll see about that." They began walking, side by side, the distant light of the Thryxian stronghold just barely visible on the horizon. They had survived, yes, but they had also learned. They had learned that survival wasn't just about facing danger. It was about facing it together, with all the chaos and humor that made life worth living. And perhaps, in some strange way, that was the first step toward saving HFY. The end.